Cuyahoga County Committee of the Whole meeting for Monday, July 21st, 2014 will please come to order. The clerk will call the roll.
Calling the roll, Mr. Hairston. Mr. Hairston is absent at the moment. Ms. Simon. Ms. Simon is absent at the moment. Mr. Greenspan. Mr. Greenspan is absent at the moment. Mr. Miller.
Here.
Mr. Brady.
Here.
Mr. Germana.
Here.
Mr. Gallagher. Mr. Gallagher is absent at the moment. Mr. Schron.
Here.
Ms. Conwell. Ms. Conwell is absent at the moment. Mr. Jones.
Here.
And Ms. Conley. Here. There is a quorum.
Thank you very much. And we have one item referred to committee. The clerk will please read the item.
Ordinance number 2014-0020, an ordinance enacting Chapter 717 of the Cuyahoga County Code to authorize extension of the capital improvement bed tax and to authorize the use of said proceeds in accordance with agreement with the mayor of the city of Cleveland as approved by a majority of local mayors and city managers and declaring the necessity that this ordinance become immediately effective.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we're going to start by calling upon Director McCloof and/or Joe Boatwright, representing the Law Department, to bring us up to date on where we are with this legislation.
So right now before you, we have a proposed substitute that would allow all of the proceeds that come in based on this extended tax to be distributed directly to Positively Cleveland, and they would use that money for capital improvements. We're thinking the way to do this, right now they're already getting 3% of the bed tax, and they've done a great job with those monies already, and they've gotten those monies already since 1980. So having them have this additional extension of 1.5% would be a good use of the money towards bringing other events and to the community. The other thing that we obviously also are simultaneously working with, we have to get approval of the local mayors, ultimately, a majority of them, and we have to get approval of the mayor of the city of Cleveland, and we're working on all of that as we speak. So the hope is we get this passed out of committee on the agenda for tomorrow's council meeting for second reading, and then ultimately, by the time I think the next council meeting comes, it's like August 12th maybe.
August 12th is
August
correct.
12th, then we can get it approved at third reading, because we'll already have approval of the mayors and the mayor of the city by that time.
There is a 3-week gap between tomorrow's council meeting and the next council meeting, giving you a larger amount of time to work with.
Right.
Okay. Yes.
It was my recollection at the last meeting, though, that you were going to approach the mayors with the concept, because these were independent decisions that they needed to prove, and it was something you needed to get in recognition. Why are we now just having this conversation again about this? What have we done in the interim since our last meeting to actually ensure that would have taken place?
And actually, that's happened. Nate Kelly, the outreach to the mayors is not happening through the law department. It's happening through Nate Kelly and David Gilbert, and they can probably answer that question.
Oh, okay. For some reason, I thought that was an agreement piece that you folks were actually orchestrating on the legal side, because last time, I believe that the law department spoke to this issue.
No, absolutely. What we're trying to finalize is the agreement between us and the city of Cleveland, and that's in the process. The discussions have been with the city of Cleveland. I think there was a draft circulating with the city of Cleveland.
And there's some meetings.
Yeah, and then they're doing the meetings with the 59, to get the approval for the remainder of the mayors.
I guess I thought you were also going to get an agreement that they had to be in concert with that also.
No, precisely. That agreement? Nate, you can speak to it. Yeah.
Mr. Chairman.
Please.
The mayor of Cleveland has, as I understand it, in order to get approval, they meet the requirements of the law. We have to have the mayor of Cleveland. We need that mayor's approval. And then we also need the mayors of the rest of the county get their approval in addition to your approval. So we've started with Mayor Jackson, and after today's meeting, then we will contact directly all of the mayors in Cuyahoga County. I understand that there's been some movement on what would actually be proposed to council, so we wanted to be able to speak with clarity to the mayors on what is going to be proposed to council finally, and then move forward from there. And we anticipate having that approval for you before the next council meeting.
And if I may, just sort of technically what the suburban's mayors are approving is the agreement with the mayor of Cleveland. So you have to have the agreement with the mayor in Cleveland in place for the suburban. There's no separate agreement with the suburban mayors and then an agreement with Cleveland. It's you do the agreement with the mayor of Cleveland and then the suburban mayors approve that agreement itself.
And we have in front of us a draft of the agreement with the mayor of Cleveland that we're currently working with, which has been distributed to everybody. I would call upon Mr. Gilbert and see if you have anything to add at this point.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just to go a little further, we have a letter prepared to go to all of the suburban mayors and city managers, and what it will include is a form for them, if they approve, to check and send back. And once we have a majority of those, then, or at least we'll check with the legal department, that will suffice. So we have those ready to go and have the list, and as soon as things are approved today, that'll go out. So, so we'll have 3 weeks to get a majority of those checked and sent back. The one other thing I did want to just bring up as a follow-up to our conversation the last time. There was talk about how the dollars are spent, and I think what's important to note is right now, as mentioned before, about 31% of our budget, around roughly $3 million, is we write checks for capital projects that are going on. The dollars that would come in from the 1.5% would substitute, would be allowed to be used for those dollars, freeing up that roughly $3 million to do most of that, to do, quite frankly, more of what we do. So I think I had gotten a lot of questions after people thought there was going to be a whole big chunk of money being spent on new capital projects, and it really is about I thought one thing would be important to know, that just how we spend our dollars as an organization. And just in big buckets, 6% of the money is for overhead, rent, and all that kind of stuff. Convention services is 5%, convention sales is 16%, partnerships is 6%, direct marketing, media buys and so on, outside the market is 20%, destination development 4%, and administrative 12%. And we get, every expense is approved by our board. We have an audit every year by the state. We have an independent audit by an auditor. And so I think it's just important to note that really what we're trying to do is to be more competitive with our peer cities, have a budget closer to theirs. It's not spending money on large new capital projects. It really is doing more of, trying to do more of the things that we currently do.
Can you give us those numbers in a printed sheet, or
Yes.
go a little slower, either one of the two?
I have both, but I'll go in order. Marketing is 20%. The next highest is convention sales at 16%. Overall administrative is 12%, which is really so that's everything excluding exact specific overhead. We have our partnerships program, where we engage about 700 companies throughout the county. That's 6% of our budget. Our overhead overall is 6%. And our convention services is 5%, and destination development currently is 4%. The remainder is the capital. So that adds up to 69% in total. The remainder is what we pay out toward Gateway and the convention center, and then the TIF money that'll be estimated TIF money from the convention hotel. Does that make sense?
Okay, thank you. Ms. Simon has joined the meeting, and I'm going to recognize Council President Conley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Gilbert, you talked about the board making decisions, and I have to show my ignorance. Tell me how the board is appointed, how many people are on there? Is there minority representation? I mean, we're giving you this money, we want to know, and the board's making a decision, who's the board?
The board is, there are a handful of appointees. The county has
I don't know what a handful is.
5 altogether. So
There's
the
5
board's,
altogether on the board?
pardon?
5 altogether on the board?
Yeah, the total board right now, there is not a cap. The board is currently 29 members. It's the composition is, and in fact, I believe, I do have something here I'll leave with you that has the full list of the board. It's made up of people from the hotel industry, from various attractions, some of the larger attractions throughout arts organizations and so on, a representative sample. We have 2 appointees from the county, 2 appointees from the city, 1 appointee from the Mayors and Managers Association. And we have some corporate folks. And those are really the major buckets of that we look at. And it's...
Women and minorities.
I'd have to go through, I would say a good representation. We could do a breakout for you, but...
I don't know what a good representation is.
I can count, I mean, I have it here, if that helps.
Okay, well, I can, if you want to give it to me, or we can
Sure.
give it to me. Okay.
I have marked up this one, let me go,
Okay.
I have one more, let me grab for you.
I mean, we're giving you taxpayers' dollars, and this board is making a decision. I just want to know who the board is and what the makeup.
Absolutely.
I mean, is there diverse in terms of geographic? Is there people from around the county? People from the city of Cleveland? People
Again,
from
you know,
people from
I
Parma?
believe all of it, but this is what I gave you before, that has
Okay.
the numbers. And this has, oh, they're currently at 31.
Okay,
And then this has a list of all the board members.
okay, all right, thank you.
Mr. Gilbert, there's been some discussion about the possibility of a later separate memorandum of understanding between the county and positively Cleveland, which would provide an opportunity for there to be a review of proposed expenditures from time to time, such as through the biennial budget process. I'm wondering if you could comment on that.
I think it's something we were made aware of, we'd be welcome and happy to do. We do give a report to the county each year, and we could add to that whatever you would need. So yeah, no problems at all.
Ms. Simon and then Councilman Schron.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. Hi, Mr. Gilbert.
Hi.
So I thought, and I'm sorry if I missed this and if I don't want to take up this body's time, if it was already explained that there was a majority of the mayors and managers who had to reach a consensus about how the money would be used. Is that still the case?
Yes.
And is that reflected any place in what I'm looking at? This refers to where is that set forth that the mayors throughout the county will have a say in
Well,
allocation, right? They have to reach an agreement on,
let me comment on that. You have in front of you a 3-page draft agreement, and which is the current draft that's being taken to the mayor of Cleveland, and then, if approved, there would go to the mayors of the various municipalities. As you can see, the current draft is very open-ended and does not contain a whole lot of specifics, and it was intentionally written that way to create as much flexibility as possible. But that's what we have at this point.
oh, okay, so that's going to go to the mayors and managers? once, okay, for ratification?
The time schedule that's currently being thought about is that if we come together today, we would pass it out of today's committee meeting on to second reading at tomorrow night's council meeting. And then it is 3 weeks until the next council meeting on August the 12th. And during that 3-week time, we would hopefully get the mayor of Cleveland's approval, and once the mayor of Cleveland approves, it would be sent to each of the mayors of the various communities where majority support would be required. And the county council could not vote on the final reading until we have the majority support, because the state legislation reads that the mayors have to give the approval first before the county votes on it. So if we did not have that by August 12th, we would just have to roll it over to the next meeting.
Okay, thank you. And then two more quick questions. One is whether Positively Cleveland has the ability, given their mandate, to help out other communities with their chambers of commerce or their marketing for their communities, instead of, and maybe you do this now and I don't know, but help out the whole county if they need help with marketing funding. Because I know the Shaker Heights has a branding, Euclid has, they're reaching out to bring residents in. Is that something Positively Cleveland has done or would consider doing?
Thank you, Councilman. We don't currently give grants to suburban communities, but we work with a lot of them. The way our marketing traditionally works is when we're in outlying communities, we really market Cleveland as one brand, kind of get them into a funnel of information. Once you get people in, because the way, at least the research has shown, people aren't going to come from Pittsburgh to visit Shaker Heights or visit Lakewood. First they need to make the decision to come to Cleveland, and then once you get them in that set of information, then you get them to look at would they want to go to the Rock Hall or would they want to go to Coventry or so we do work with communities, and like I said, we have about 700 different community partners that we work with, and we really market everything that I want to say everything Cleveland, but visitor related destinations.
Okay, and I'll hold my third question till later, but I guess what I'm saying is I understand that when you market visitors, you want to centralize to the core and then give all the other attractions and events going on throughout the whole area. But maybe some of this funding that's coming from hotels that are not only located in Cleveland proper, we have hotels throughout the whole county, and why wouldn't it help communities to have some funding to help market their own communities? That's what I'm saying. That's different from what you're saying.
Yeah.
I know you said we don't give grants, but maybe that's something we need to talk about.
And I will say, Beechwood is a great example, because we actually work very hand in glove. They have, with their Chamber of Commerce, their Visitors Bureau, we put a lot of business in their hotels. Same thing with Independence. About half of actually more than half of the leads for conventions and meetings go into non-Cleveland hotels. They go into suburban hotels. So a lot for us depends on what the customer is looking for. If someone wants to be, if it's a group of 400 people and they want to be downtown, that's where they're going to go. But if it's a group that is more sensitive to rate, we put out leads to every single hotel within the county. There's over 100. And ultimately, we let the customer decide where they would want to go. But we, like I said, more than half of our leads and almost half the business goes to suburban hotels.
Lastly, what I'm saying is the communities themselves need money to market their own communities. And we can talk later about that.
I mean, definitely open to looking at it for sure. I think if we did, we have to think of what's an equitable, how do we do it in a good systematic way, as opposed to, I just think we'd have to look at how a system could be put in place.
Correct. And
Yeah.
maybe we can talk about that later.
Yep,
Okay, thanks.
for sure.
Councilman Brady.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is just from my own.
Excuse me.
I'm sorry.
I
We went out of
Councilman
order.
Tron was first.
Okay.
I'll be very brief. I just want to make sure that I believe it's $1.5 million that was indicated would be going towards on a 3-year cycle or 4-year cycle to bring the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction ceremonies here, even though it's not defined as capital, is coming out of your operating funds for purposes of this definition. It's not coming out of the money from the bed tax, but it will be coming out of a commitment from you, from Positively Cleveland. Is that?
That's correct. That's exactly.
This agreement is, even though it doesn't have that specific language, I didn't see that language in there per se. So when people are talking about helping things out, we are talking about helping out multiple communities as a result of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame coming here. And it's my understanding that when the convention comes here in 2 years, we're talking about 50 events every evening that have to take place, and there's just no way physically possible they're all gonna take place downtown. Is that a correct statement?
Yes, Mr. Councilman. In fact, it's 1,200 events during the week of the convention, during 4 days of the convention. Those are just events that are controlled by the RNC. Every state does an event. Yeah, it is. In fact, we have a meeting Friday. We're bringing together venues, about 70 or 80 venues, about 120 hotels to meet with the RNC to start that process. So, yeah, they will be all over the region.
Yeah, my understanding would be, it's gonna be every single place in this county is going to participate in some way, shape, or form, because there's just no way we're gonna have, because these are simultaneous events.
Correct.
My understanding is there's 50 to 60 events every single evening with a couple hundred people that'll be existing at each one of these things, so.
Correct. And in fact, part of our bid was, we were very careful to show them that the big cluster of hotels, where they're clustered, whether, again, Beechwood, Independence, Westlake, near the airport, we also had to show them all the different restaurant and venues in each cluster for that reason, that if Utah were staying in Beechwood, they would hold their events out there. So they needed to know that they wouldn't have to take a bus downtown to hold an event, that they could, throughout the county, all the venues could be close to where their hotels were.
And it was just Ms. Simon's point that there will be no choice other than to integrate all of the activities in this county, I think, to make sure that everybody's participating in that in that venue. So my assumption is you're going to be promoting anyone and everyone at that point in time.
Correct.
I'm sorry, Mr. Shawn, no, that wasn't my point. My point was is different communities need funding to help their own campaigns, to have their own marketing strategies to bring people to their community, not with regard to events that are being held downtown, but some communities struggle with trying to fund their marketing pieces. And that's all I was inquiring about. And I'm sure you may be hearing about that too as you go into the community, what the communities actually need. And that's one of the things they would need help with. And I think it'd be great that we could talk about incorporating that, and I don't see why we wouldn't.
Councilman Brady.
Yes, actually, the councilman's question stimulated another thought, so I'm going to go right there first instead of the more mundane thing I was looking at. You know, I don't want to have a long conversation about this because that's not what we're here today. But you know, given the fact that it's bed tax, I mean, you folks have been, I guess previously as the Conventions Bureau, been receiving the lion's share of this since 1980, so this percentage and a half was used to pay off the debt for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And you know, now that we're getting to a place where we've really we kind of stop and go after, you know, and we were really reaching a place where it seems like some tremendous opportunity for some real synergy and not just, you know, a good few years and then we'll wait for another decade before we get a few more good ones. It seems like one of the most obvious ways that we ought to be able to have the stature at this point is to get the rock and roll inductions more than every 3 years. It's, you know, we've gone through this. It's been kind of frustrating. You don't really understand the whole record industry. You do understand enough to to see why a lot of the people that are involved, want to do this in New York and those kinds of venues. But, after a while, you sort of feel like a stepchild, I mean, this is where the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is. This is where it all happened back in the 80s when people were making, soliciting in that USA Today contest. This is where, the state and locally the first money was, come up with. There was a whole, 25, 30 years of activity behind this, and it just seems like we ought to be, growing up to the point now, if we can have national political conventions and a new convention center and new hotels, that we ought to be able to get this event, which is a big event, and not have to settle for 3 years anymore. And of course, we had to fight for the 3 years. For quite some time. So I just want to say that I think we've earned the right to have these induction ceremonies at least every other year.
Mr. Council, if it helps, Greg Harris, the CEO of the Rock Hall. I don't know whether you want a response, but Greg would probably
I'd love to hear a response. Yeah.
Council, thank you. I came out here from a place that had inductions every year, from the Baseball Hall of Fame. And in walking in, the immediate thought was exactly your thought. Why isn't this here every single year? And let's figure out how to do it. After being with it now for 2 cycles and being in it, it is an incredible ask of the community. This is significant dollars to execute an event of this stature that's broadcast quality for television. It has all those pieces. And it was a big ask of the public. It was a big ask of the city, of the state, and also the corporate community and the foundation community. And that's how we did it in 09 and 12. This funding will make it, smoother and cement it so that we're certain we can do that 3-year cycle. I'm going to say, as a representative of the organization, we would love to consider doing it more frequently. Yep.
Some resources on the table here.
I'm going to say that, and I'm going to say that, with the resources that are here, they are, they'd be dedicated after this passes, and let us go through the cycle and begin, to establish it without that big ask of the community. Because if we did it every other year and we still need to go to the corporate community and others to raise another $3 million, plus it's going to be really, really heavy duty. And it's not the kind of thing that I think is going to be as well received. But let us, with this funding being secure, it gives us more security, more breathing room. And I'm going to say, I'm hedging a hair, but we would absolutely consider looking at it. And our desire is that, I hear you loud and clear. For now, I'm very willing to commit to, if this comes together, that we will do it every 3 years, and we won't look back. But it is a good suggestion, and I'd like to see how it goes and keep the door open.
All right. Well, that's a discussion I'd like to continue. I was as was Councilman Miller, on this Cleveland City Council when this whole thing jumped off so many years ago, and I just think that there's so much more that now we're in a position to do in this community, to create an event, to create several days, to create a week around this event in a way that maybe we weren't initially.
This is one of those events that to have it go to another city, they would bid on it, and there'd be a very competitive process to make sure they could get it. Cleveland has it, and now it's a matter of executing it really well. Even with this dedicated revenue, we're still raising about 70% of it from the corporate community, from the foundation community, and through ticket sales. And that's still something that is a little bit of a risk, but having these dollars backstopping that and giving us the secured piece, at least we have a good chunk secure. It's These are expensive
It's
events.
something unique to the city and obviously, and so, you know, I think we can still continue, I think we can still find ways to make it more visible and more a part of the community's identity than it is at this point. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
The other question I had was a logistical question. I'm just trying to understand a little bit better now, going back to how this decision is being made. Who is meeting with the mayor of Cleveland? I mean the county, and I don't mean what people, but positively Cleveland and the county. Is there someone else? I mean, give me a little bit of a picture inside this, and who is coordinating the this contact with the mayors, and you know how's this actually happening?
Great. So, thanks, Councilman. Nate. I think that with the mayor, when this was brought up, I actually had a direct briefing with him and some of his staff, with Chief McCall and his Chief of Staff Stillman was also well aware, and he had pledged support. There's a call today with Matt Carroll and Valerie McCall and myself, just to get everything all set. We believe it's kind of the final. They just want to have a last talk through the details. We've actually enlisted the help of a number of people, and in terms of the county mayors, actually we're going to contact a couple of you to just get your thoughts on who would be best to sign the letter to them. But we've been working with the county law department to make sure that what's sent to them is exactly correct legally. A letter would go to each of the mayors and city managers with a cover letter explaining what this is, a copy of the actual legislation. I believe I have this right, and then a last page that would just be a one pager that if they ratify it, they would check it and send it back. So the process would be once we collect a majority of those forms, then we are legally all good to go. And this is partly because the Mayors and Managers Association is not meeting as a group until September. And
If I'm the mayor of a suburb, and I'm going to receive a document, it's going to be a document from the county.
well, I think quite frankly, we haven't decided we need to this week who it would come from. So is it signed by someone from council, someone from or some combination? That's what we've started to have some conversations of who we think is ultimately most appropriate, what group of people.
All right. Well, these are just the mechanics, but I personally would like to know, when you determine when you determine those things, I would like to know exactly how this is operating.
I think that the only thing we don't
I may
have.
get a call from a suburban mayor about it.
Perfect. No, and I think the only thing we have left to determine is who signs the letters. What individual or groups of people, and other than that, I think we're set on exactly what would go.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, we have Councilman Jurana, Council President Connolly, and Councilman Tran.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess my first question is, this bed tax is a continuation, and does it in any way make our hotels in Cuyahoga County uncompetitive?
Thank you, Mr. Collins. Actually, a great question. We have asked the hotel members of our board, which are both downtown and suburban, to ask some of their counterparts. They came back to us and said, unequivocally, if these dollars are spent on promoting travel and tourism, they are 100% for it. They would be against it if they were spent on something outside of travel and tourism. So that was the word that we received back. And we have overall one of the higher occupancy taxes in the country. We're out of the top 10 now, but we're higher. But thankfully, we're a very affordable city in terms of our rates. So I could tell you in my now 4 years at Positively Cleveland and 15 years at Sports Commission, we have never lost one piece of business based on the cost of our hotels. So at least that leads me to believe that it does not does not and would not make us uncompetitive.
Okay, well, I kind of knew that answer, but I just wanted you to confirm it, because this is a no-brainer. I can't understand why any mayor would not want to sign this. I mean, this is not an increase in taxes on their constituents. And it's probably the perfect example of a sustainability. Sustainability is a big buzzword today. And here, visitors are paying a tax to help promote the next visitor. So I'm tremendously in favor of this. My communities, Parma and Parma Heights, does not have a hotel, believe it or not, the 7th largest city in the state of Ohio. We do not have a hotel, but we're definitely, and I'd be willing to personally deliver the letter, regardless of who's signing it, and talking to my 3 mayors, which is Parma, Parma Heights, and Middleburg Heights, because this is sustainability. I like the idea that it's directed. Now, I don't want this to be offensive, but when we came into office, there's an organization called the Veterans Service Administration. And when we called them in and we wanted to see how they're spending their money, and they're, by statute, got the money. And don't get this wrong, I am a big, big booster of the Veterans Service Administration, and I've been served by them well. But they've come, and now, they realize that we're their friend, and we really respect what they're doing. But by them coming to the council with their budget, it's public money. It's taxpayers' money that goes to them. So what the point I'm trying to get at, and I'm trying to be tender about it, handing over this money to the Positively Cleveland board, this is tax money. And I don't know, the correlation that popped in my mind is Jobs Ohio. There's this big criticism because Jobs Ohio is getting tax money and there's no accountability. I just think we're smarter than that. We support everything that you've done. We think Positively Cleveland's done a great job, but somehow, some way, in my mind, it's tax money that should be reported publicly. Do you care to answer to that?
Thank you. When I appreciate the support, I can tell you from the bottom of my heart, we do not take lightly. We know these are tax dollars. And that's why when I came in 4 years ago, and this is not about me, but when I came in the organization, I asked the staff and the board, where are the metrics as to whether or not we're effective? There were none. I'm telling you, there were none. And there's 2 pieces to this. One is, and we'll make our books open. There's no problem with that. None whatsoever. We're a nonprofit. A year and a half later, it's public online anyways, our audits, so I have no problem with that. And so I think that's one piece. But the other piece is, are you effective with it? And we spent an entire year doing some very significant research to benchmark every way we could think. We went out and we met with tons of different constituent groups. And we said, what would you see as measures of success? And there were different things across the board. Some were about how many hotel rooms. Some were about how do you judge the view of Cleveland and the perception of Cleveland by outsiders, lots of different ways. We set benchmarks to be held accountable. And so I think there'd be 2 things, not only the budget, but also here's our metrics. We actually create a metrics report now that we started sending to about 300 community leaders, including all of you, that we started sending out about 18 months ago. We send it every 6 months. And even if the news isn't good, we set about 8 or 10 different metrics. If it goes down, we're still going to send it out. We're not going to hide, because that I want to be held accountable for our organization. And so I guess I would tell you, we'll be as open as what questions you ask, we'll answer. And that's not only on the budget, but also, are we being effective, and are we having a return on investment for the community for those dollars? So,
Well, thank you for your answer. And, let me just say, I'm not suggesting that the county council would approve a budget. All I'm saying is that there should be some transparency, and you've said that. To the other point, the idea of effectiveness use of government or taxpayers' dollars, we're all for. But at the same time, I'm not against trying something new. And if it doesn't work and it doesn't have the metrics, you'd have the sense to stop spending that money. But I don't think, to do something daring that works is a heck of a lot better than not trying and just doing the boring, undaring thing. So my point is, we're not asking you to have your money approved. We just want to have transparency.
thank you.
And I think we won't run into the public relations. I know when I was out talking about the sports, people kept on saying, well, we don't know how much the Browns are making, the Indians are making, let's see their financial reports, This is different. It's, like you said, a nonprofit. And I think public relations-wise, it's a win.
Yeah, thank you.
Ms. Connolly, then Councilman Tron and Councilman Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm kind of on the same page, I think, a little bit with Councilor Jimana, that we just want to make sure that this is public money that is distributed. You've given us the breakdown. But I keep going back to the board here. It's a highly corporate board, and I'm very impressed with the members. But you said that there were 2 from the city and 2 from the county and 2 from the city managers. Are the rest of the people, is it self-perpetuating? How do you get the rest of the board members?
Thank you, Councilman. We have a governance and nominating committee, and they set a number of different criteria for the types of people that they think could help the organization. And ultimately, at the end of the day, that's what we look for. It's not people are there to use the organization to serve their cause. It needs to be people who are there to serve the mission of the organization. We actually, about 3 years ago, we in essence, hit a restart button. We hired or engaged BVU. I don't know if you're familiar. It's a nonprofit that helps other nonprofits. We had them look at our whole board structure, the types of people, how it's put together, and we almost started from scratch. And we turned over about 60% of our board. And quite frankly, there were a lot of people who, I think in the end, maybe weren't there necessarily to advance the mission of the organization. And so one thing I'll tell you is we don't grow we have not grown the board much. We've done it by organic turnover. The thoughts of the governance and nominating committee is not to have a 50, 60 person board. We wanted 30 to be around the number, who are people that each one of them brings something very important to the table to help the organization.
Well, what concerns me is that I'm impressed with so many of the very, very important people that you have on the board, but are they there to do kind of window dressing, or are they there to do the day-to-day operation? And it concerns me that I don't really see any kind of people that have specific interests of the city of Cleveland. I know we have Valerie McCall from the mayor's office, but it doesn't seem like we have much community representation here. It's all very, very, very corporate.
Well, I think that there's probably, I've looked, about a third of the board that is probably corporate related, and the other 2/3 are really directly related to our industry in one way, shape, or form. And that's really how we designed it. We want the input of people like Greg Harris or other people that understand different aspects of travel and tourism, different aspects of marketing. We have 2 different people there who run marketing firms. And quite frankly, the corporate have been very important. We work extraordinarily hard on engaging the board members. We have a board meeting, we'll have 25, 26 out of 30, 31 at that board meeting. And we have numerous committees, and they get very active and engaged. And that is part of why I would venture to guess I could count on one hand the number of people who probably aren't actively engaged some way multiple times a year doing something for the organization. Now, one thing I would say is we don't ask them to get involved in the operational aspect. That really is more of staff. It's really guiding what's the strategy of the organization, how do they help advance the strategy, those kinds of things. Absolutely.
Yeah. But I just want to reiterate what Mr. Germana was saying, that we have to make it clear that, how these decisions are made, because these are public monies, and we want to just make sure that it's a clear process of how the decisions are being made.
Thank you.
Okay, we have Councilman Tron, followed by Councilman Jones.
Just, again, for pure mechanics, you're going to be sending out a letter that's going to go out to the mayors, the 50, well, actually 50, 6 other mayors, and I don't know if you're going to the township trustees in regards to that. Could you just send us a copy of that prior to the letter going in the envelope?
Yes.
And so we could at least see what it is. So when we get the calls from our 18, in my particular case, 18 mayors, I'd love to know what it says before they read it.
Can I ask you one step further, Councilman?
Sure.
Would it be proper in the letter to ask them, we were going to put, hey, if you could call me, or would it be proper to put in the letter to call your county councilman if you have questions?
Not only would be proper, I think that's a very appropriate thing, and that's what I think Mr. Germana was saying. If we believe in this when we take our vote, then we should believe in it when we get the call from our mayors. So if you're against it in your vote, then you can speak against it when your mayors call. If you're for it, then you should be prepared. But what sometimes we find happen is that the letter goes out, it's in the mail, and we find out about it, that it went out 2 days later. So all we're asking is the same courtesy that anybody would expect, is let us know, let us see the final agreement when the mayor signs off on it, and just give it to us. And if you say it's going to go out in 3 days, that's okay. We won't go out and bust the surprise. We'll let the surprise of them opening the envelope all by themselves. But at least let us know what it says ahead of time.
Great, thank you.
Councilman Jones.
Dave, you mentioned that there are the metrics for success. Well, what are the metrics that you've established?
Thank you, Councilman. There's I don't know if I have all of them, but there are annually number of individual visits from outside of 50 miles or more into Cuyahoga County by a tourist. We have the number, the amount of direct spending by those visitors. We have the number of jobs that are supported by the SIC codes related to travel and tourism. Those are all, we get statistics for the county.
You say SIC?
It's a government code, so every industry has a code, and the government picks certain ones that they say these relate to travel and tourism. So it might mean hotels are in there, taxis are in there, things like that. So they define, the government defines for us what makes up money spent on travel and tourism. We look at hotel occupancy. We look at average rate of hotels. We look at new, and this has been really fascinating, is perception of Cleveland. And we look at perception of Cleveland with a handful of different customer groups. Meeting planners, we do one study on what they think of Cleveland. Leisure travelers, and then we also started doing a local study. I think I mentioned in a previous presentation how the perception of locals actually is very important to proliferating travel and tourism and travel and tourism marketing. And then in all those perception studies, we also benchmark our peer set. We benchmark against Columbus, Cincinnati, Pittsburgh, and Milwaukee as leisure travel peer sets. And so, because I'll give you an example. Let's just say that our number of visitors is up by 2%. We may say that's great, but if every other place is up 5%, we're not doing very well. Conversely, if we're up 2%, but everyone else is flat, then, so you have to look at not only are we getting how big is the pie, and then how big of a piece of the pie do we get. So those Hannah, is there anything I'm missing? I think those are, I may be missing one or two, but those are.
Business travelers.
Business travel, yeah, well, interesting, thank you, Mr. Council. What we found is that that's in the overall number. When we did the research, what the researchers came back and said, business travelers, if you're coming to a meeting or a convention, what you spend your money on is like a leisure traveler, because you're being told where to go. I have business in Cleveland, or I'm going to a convention in Indianapolis, that's where I'm going to go. But when you go out at night and spend your money, then you're counted as a leisure traveler. So the one other thing also, I'm sorry, very, very important is what guides the visitor experience, because that gets into when we've talked about wayfinding and other things. That was critical for us, is to understand the mind of our customer. If they say they have a good experience or not a good experience in Cleveland, why are they saying that? So we can look to take corrective action.
So with the return of LeBron James, we've got improvement in perception and many other
Yes, we
factors.
did. I mean, it really was an unbelievable week with the Republican convention and LeBron. It's just the number of articles. I mean, a lot of you may have seen on the front page of USA Today, it was a big picture of Cleveland. Top of the fold, front page said Cleveland Rising. We could spend 100 times what we have in our budget. We couldn't have gotten that.
I was in Miami that night that LeBron announced, and we got all kinds of coverage, all kinds of pictures of Cleveland.
You were one of the few happy people there, I would imagine.
Tell us, so I know how you feel.
Right. But it has been already unbelievable, and it's translating into business. We are already getting calls. I think I may have mentioned the last time I was here, after the RNC, we're already getting calls from meeting convention planners since that time saying we'd like to add you to our list to get a request for proposal for our meeting. That they weren't sending it. I think in a lot of ways it's sort of affirmation that, boy, I guess if the RNC is going to go there, we can go there too. So I think the combination of those two is going to take us, but you have to take advantage of it.
I'm trying to grasp what you actually do. When, let's say with LeBron James returning, does that cause your organization to do something to capitalize on his return? Do you document the benefits of his return? What?
I think that probably the best way to put it is, so we spent about 18 months developing a new destination brand. And it has to do with this Cleveland and the whole. You may have seen the whole brand essence video, and it really ultimately what that brand is about. It sounds the research. It is really putting forth what Cleveland is. We have to change the narrative of what people think of when they think of the word Cleveland, which quite frankly is not very good. And it's born over 40 or 50 years. I think what LeBron does and what RNC does more than anything else, it allows us to greater amplify that message. We're not going to change the message. We're not a different city because LeBron's here. Our neighborhoods aren't all of a sudden better. Our restaurants aren't better, but it's going to allow people to receive the message more. And I'll tell you a great example. We have now this relates to the RNC, but the same thing will happen with LeBron, because now we're going to be we are going to max out on national television games and international television games. We with the RNC, we're now having every CNN, Wall Street Journal, everybody is coming in to scout Cleveland because they want to see where they're gonna be during the convention. Well, they're coming to us, and we're saying is we'll show you around, but let us take you around and show you all the great things there are about Cleveland. We're taking advantage of every opportunity that these things are affording us, and I think the best way to put it, again, it's going to allow us to amplify that message of who we really are and why people should come here.
So as you take them around. Now it sounds like you're going into the area of how you promote the many cities, whether South Euclid, Maple, Garfield, Ohio City, portions of Cleveland. Do you create a master list of destinations? I know that's part of your 4% of your percentage. Do you, although you may not at this moment give money to these chambers of commerce throughout the community, but what is your relationship, if any, with these destination spaces around the county? Do you have a partnership, a list of their restaurants, or how does that work?
We do. So if you go on our website, there's hundreds of restaurants that are listed. But I will be honest with you, not a little corner restaurant in a far corner of the county may not be a place that if someone's coming in for a convention is going to go out of their way to go to. So we also at times have to make some value judgments of we can't be all things to all people. There are certain places that are so I know you live in South Euclid. That's where I grew up. My parents are in the same house for 50 years, right behind Cedar Center. They're in the wall behind the South Euclid side. I grew up hopping over the wall to go to work. But I will tell you, as much as I love Cedar Center, probably a visitor to Cleveland, we're not going to say, come into Cleveland and go to Cedar Center. I mean, it's great. Again, my parents go to Bob Evans there twice a week. We're probably not, but that, it's no knock on Cedar Center. That's not, that doesn't rise to the top of how we would market Cleveland. So we also have to make some value judgments where, now I would say, a downtown Lakewood close by may be more appealing because it's closer, because it has more sort of interesting, unique. So we do have to make some value judgments, or what are we can't specifically market every restaurant. We can't specifically market it's not smart in any business. You really have to, but I will tell you this. If there are 63,000 jobs now, according to the research that the state does. We don't do it, the state does it. So it's not ours. They do it for Columbus, Cincinnati. 63,000 jobs supported by travel and tourism in Cuyahoga County. Those people are living in every one of the 59 communities. And they are spending their money, they're paying taxes, so sometimes it's directed, a visitor will spend $1, sometimes it's the spin-off that if we create more jobs, they're living in our communities. So I think it's or they're working in a place that might be one of Michael Simon's restaurants, or at an arts institution, or a place where we more heavily market, because that's where visitors more want to go.
I'd like to, at this point, put an issue out on the table and get some comment from my colleagues. And that is that the current legislation provides for a 20-year extension. And that made every sense to me until I learned in the last meeting that the legislature said that we can extend it for up to 40 years, but we only have one shot. It's not like we can come back 20 years from now and extend it again. And I've been thinking about it every day since then, and it just makes sense that we should do the full 40. The bed tax pays for capital improvements to improve our visitor attractiveness, and by meeting existing capital obligations also frees up resources for tourism promotion. And I think we're always going to need these things. As Mr. Gilbert has pointed out, we're currently close to last among peer cities in the amount of money that we spend in this area. And as Dan just said, what we need is real synergy, not just a few good years. We need something long-term and sustainable. And if we don't do the full extension, when it expires, then travel and tourism is going to compete with local projects and county services for other dollars. And I just don't think we should leave it to having to go back to the legislature. I think that we should do the full 40-year extension and be long-term and visionary in our thinking. And so I just put that out there, Ms. Simon.
Yeah, I knew you were going to bring that up. And it sort of dovetails on Councilman Jones' question. And your answer in particular was you can't be all things to everybody. And I totally get that. And that's why I have some reservation about 100% of these proceeds, especially for 40 years. I mean, if we're going to consider 40 years, I think we have to diversify some of this. The communities all benefit, as everybody's said, from spillover, but the communities are struggling with creating an identity for themselves. Cedar Center, South Euclid, marketing, they're trying to get a magazine together. A small contribution of $5,000, $10,000 to a community like that would go a long, long way. And that doesn't dilute the majority of this money going to Positively Cleveland. I don't think it's fair that everything goes to one place, because you can't be everything to everybody. You can't. But communities need help. and they need help to market themselves. And it might not be tourists, but it can be. The way this is structured is we're gonna have an induction ceremony, and this money's supposed to be for capital improvements. So there's creative ways we can do this. I don't care if it's $5,000 going to some communities to help them in their backyard. Again, I'm struggling with this, and I'm troubled that we were given this at this hour when it says it's a county-city agreement. Well, the only agreement it's between really, as we were handed this, was between the executive and Positively Cleveland and the mayor of Cleveland. This is, so when you talk about 40 years, no, I would be totally against 100% of these proceeds for 40 years going to Positively Cleveland. We don't know who's going to be in charge. We don't know what it's going to look like. I have full confidence in Mr. Gilbert today, but it could be somebody different tomorrow who doesn't keep the metrics. When you walked in, you didn't have clear metrics of how this money was being spent and what the benefit was. So no, not 40 years. The only way I would even think about that is if we were more creative in how we're going to spend this money with, instead of 100% going to one place. And that's going to be my position on this. And I'm just talking about a small, teeny tiny fraction being given to the other communities to help them promote themselves. And that's where I stand in terms of 40 years especially.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Councilman,
Yeah,
Councilman Schwan.
I certainly understand the chair's desire to maximize whatever has been authorized by the legislature, and realize that I sit with two people who have been former legislators and know that sometimes those things are tenuous, and rather than run the risk, I think that the idea of being visionary and taking out their 40 years is something that I could actually support. I know that sounds contrary for typical Republican, but I think that it is a position that I think does make sense. The legislature has given us the ability to go out there. And contrary to Ms. Simon's point of view, I really believe that, as the words are said, it's Convention and Visitors Bureau. That's what the funds were intended for. That's what the purpose, I believe, what the legislature was actually created and put in place to actually help the bed taxes, to help stimulate folks coming to this community. And if you follow what's going on in Indianapolis, our competitor, San Antonio, our competitor, that we are really not putting anywhere near what those other communities are putting into their Conventions Visitors Bureau. The reason we have 100 conventions now coming to this town is because you folks are actually doing metrics. You're doing the things that are right, and we've grown astronomically as far as what we've done. And I can tell you that, having been to China a number of times, during the LeBron era when he was here in Cleveland, there was no doubt that the posters were the height of 3 and 4 city stories of LeBron James in downtown Shanghai and downtown Beijing. You can't tell me anything but that was driving people to have those conversations about coming to Cleveland, and desire. They tuned in that one of the most actively watched TV shows in China was LeBron James playing basketball in Cleveland, Ohio. And I just cannot help but think that that is such a positive thing that we don't want to miss. And I got flooded with my board of directors on the Industrial Supply Association saying, we chose it before RNC did so.
Councilman Germana.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, Mr. Schwan, you're not the typical Republican. So, I really support this. Again, I think this is a no-brainer. Now, I support what Councilwoman Simon is saying, but it's not this bed tax. You know, there's 63,000 people. The cities, they're getting income tax. These people got jobs, they're able to pay their property tax. Maybe what we should be having a conversation with is the Greater Cleveland Partnership, Chamber of Commerce, COSI, about something helping, promoting chambers of commerce and cities in that way, but not this. This is for tourism. And And I think we'd be making a big mistake if we did not take this opportunity to extend this to the full 40 years. Because it's not our constituents that are paying this tax, it's the visitors. So it's sustainability.
Councilman Grady.
My instinct is that the 20 years is long enough, but I don't feel so strongly about it that that I want to debate my colleagues if that's where they're going. I could, I don't know how, but I'm surprised that there's support for the 40 years, but there is obviously support, but I would hesitate. I would caution the committee about putting that specifically in this legislation until we have till we hear from some more members of the council. Right now, we have three members who are for this, and that might provide the momentum for it to pass to get enough votes today. But we have some other members that are not here today. I don't know what they would think, and I think it's a fairly kind of a big issue, the difference between 20 and 40 years of taxes, so I prefer the 20, but I'm not opposed to the 40. I'm open to suggestion, but I would just want to make sure that there is an actual consensus on the council to do this.
Well, I absolutely wanted to have this discussion today, but when I started this meeting, with only 7 of us here, I immediately started thinking about if we vote on 40 versus 20, we may do it tomorrow or on August 12th rather than today. So I'm already thinking that that's a possibility. Council President Conley.
If we were to go with the 40 years, are we stuck with the same rate for the same 40 years, the same rate of the tax?
Yes.
I'm opposed to 40. I think 40 years is just too long for anything. But in 40 years, Majid's children, girls, will be playing in the Cleveland Orchestra, and he'll be retired. No, I just think the 40 years is too long. I just think that, just on general principle, just too long.
Councilman Jones.
With the bed tax, tell me, is this majority of visitors? What impact does it have on county residents? What is their usage rate, or so to speak?
Council, in terms of the bed tax itself is on any hotel room purchased within the county. So it's presumed that the vast majority of anybody staying in a hotel in the county is not a resident of the county. I'm sure it's not 100%, but it is, I would have to say, well into the high 90s of people staying in our hotels are from outside the county, and that's who pays the tax.
So I'm thinking along, what is the perception to the local residents of Cuyahoga County when we start talking about a tax? Perception-wise, are they going to feel impacted by this tax, up, down, or sideways?
It's hard for me to answer. I don't know. I will say that, again, if you look at Columbus, Cincinnati, our bed tax is almost identical, within a half a point, with this 1.5 in there of what certainly within Ohio bed tax is for the other major cities.
I've stayed in hotels in Cincinnati and in Columbus. Actually, I don't think I've stayed in a hotel here in Cleveland or in Cuyahoga County. I haven't.
So you've provided for their convention and visitors bureaus.
Councilman Germano.
I think this bed tax is kind of like the sin tax. You know, if you don't smoke, you don't drink, you never paid it, and you're going to be for it. And I think the residents would really be for this. Let the visitors help sustain the good name of Cleveland, Cuyahoga County, Northeast Ohio.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, just a quick comment, because just sort of, and the council members know how strongly I believe in home rule. I grew up in a firm that was very much embedded in home rule. My entire legal career has been about home rule. The situation that we face in this we faced it with the syntax extension, we face it here, is that those happen to be the situations that we absolutely don't have home rule ability to deviate from state law. So everything that we're dealing with here is dictated by the revised code, and we have to follow it to the letter. So the expenditures of that funds being for capital improvements, that's in the revised code. We can't deviate from it. The duration, that's in the revised code. We can't come back and change it. It's almost like every change that we ever need, we're hostage to Columbus. We have to go back to Columbus and have Columbus change the state law. And unfortunately, but that's the situation that we face with a lot of, we faced it with the syntax and we face it again here. And just something to keep in mind as the council deliberates on this, we have to follow the revised code to the letter here. It goes for the 2040, it goes for what it's spent, it goes for everything that you think of in this. We just have to follow the revised code.
Then, Mr. Chair, to the law director, I keep hearing about this offset that allows us to have the Rock Hall Fame party, which is not a capital improvement. And what I keep hearing is, well, that will free up money to enable Positive Cleveland to do that. That's not a capital improvement, right?
No, and that's how this is designed to work, is Positively Cleveland has different, funding sources. Some of it are unrestricted funds. These are what we call restricted funds. So what the idea behind this entire program, what we're trying to do here, is that it goes to Positively Cleveland. These are restricted funds. They can use them for those restricted purposes. But what you do in the process is if you free up their other sources that are unrestricted so that they can use them on marketing, so that they can use them on TV ads, so that they can use them on not just marketing, but closing the sale, and that's the issue. They can't take this money and use it toward a newsletter. They have to use it for a capital improvement. Now, the thing to think about, like the Rock Hall or some of those events, even if you think of the National Convention, there's capital improvements to build the stage, to build, those are capital expenditures in terms of, the infrastructure for that convention. But it's not necessarily for the marketing of that convention. You couldn't use it for that purpose. But that's the idea, is you're using the restricted money toward the restricted goals so that you free up the unrestricted money that they can use for the marketing and other stuff.
And that's exactly what I'm saying about the other communities who might want a little teeny piece of that. So I'm going to keep advocating on behalf of the communities with the majority of this going. I'm going to vote for this. I'm going to extend it. It's too late, but I still think, this money really, a small teeny amount would help the communities in rings go far, and that's my point. And I think it's a fair point, and I'm not sure, we keep looking through the same lens, and it might be the most obvious lens to look through, but it's important to really think outside the box sometime and check with your communities. And maybe Parma's mayor would say, hey, what, I totally disagree. This would go Miles or Shaker Heights when they're trying to market their Shaker Square and attract not only visitors but residents to live there, and this money could be used to attract piece of it for marketing to tourists, but at the same time marketing for residents to come. I mean, Shaker Square could really use the help. So I'm just saying there's other ways to look at this, and I'm just opening up a new way to look, and it's important we look to our communities, and I'm not sure they all would be on board to say, yay, they should all go downtown again.
My opinion is that it would be appropriate to use a small portion of the unrestricted money to help communities with tourism promotion that's consistent with the overall tourism and marketing plan for Greater Cleveland. I think for promotion that would be more resident-based, would probably need to find a different funding source. But I think for that one piece, it would certainly be appropriate.
And
And
That it would just be an offset, just like the Rock Hall party, you know, money could be used, that's all my point is. I know it can't go for resident, but it would free up money to market for residents, or one and the same.
Mr. Chairman.
Councilman Brady.
Just, in trying to look at how we go forward here, does this discussion, which is divided, although I don't think anybody's, wanting to have a fight over it or anything, about the 20 or 40 years, how does this impact does this impact the discussion with the mayor of Cleveland, the mayors? I mean, when does, does that have to be resolved before we do the ask to the mayor of Cleveland and so that's a kind of a.
I've been told that it does not, and that the
He's shaking
agreement.
his head yes.
No, I defer to
The agreement with the mayor doesn't specify which and leaves it open, but I would refer to Mr. Boatwright to confirm that.
That's correct. The mayors are approving the use, and we're going to allow them to refer to the legislation so they could see that. But the agreement does not specify 20 or 40 years. So, I mean, we probably do want to let them know, I'd imagine, in due course. But
Okay, I'm just trying to figure out what the timeline is limited on this, and I was just asking because it seems to me like there would be a difference in what we were asking.
That's a great question, because I guess if it's okay, we'd work with the law department with the language, and obviously we'll send it then to you before we send it out. But we'll work with them on the language, and if it should, the 20 or 40 should be included, and if so, how? But and then we'll get that to you. Is that?
Councilman Germano.
Let me just say, my position is if this was a tax that people of Cuyahoga County had to pay, I'd want it to be a short period so that they could have the say in reapproving it. But the taxpayers of Cuyahoga County are not paying. It's the visitors that are paying this tax. And because of that, we should, I feel very strongly that we should take that opportunity to have the longest time available. So, and then when we get the full council together, we could decide this, but it just makes sense to me.
I think that if that we should use the substitute that has the 20-year provision for today, and that if we're gonna vote on 40 versus 20, we're gonna vote on it tomorrow. And in the meantime, we can talk with the people who aren't here at this time.
I second your motion.
Well, I'm not going to lobby anybody, so for those who are, you have an advantage here.
And I would like to bring up one other point for discussion, and this is one that I don't have any particular opinion on, but we should discuss, which is that the point has been raised that once it's extended, if we decide down the road that it should be repealed, it could be repealed. But the legal people are telling us that if we want to hold open that possibility, that we should probably put language in the agreement with the mayor of Cleveland saying that the mayor is agreeing that it will be extended for up to so many years or until such time as the council and the executive decide to repeal it. And the question is whether we want to to have the law department put that kind of language in the agreement, or whether we want to not put that language in there, under which circumstances the law department is telling us we probably still could repeal it, but it would just be legally less clear than if we actually put it into the agreement. So I put that out there for any comment.
On that issue, so we need the mayor of Cleveland's approval and the majority of the mayors of the suburbs to enter into the agreement, but we don't need their approval to repeal the agreement?
Apparently not, but particularly providing that that language is in the agreement. I mean, if that's exactly what the problem is with trying to repeal it, if there's not language in the agreement, there could be a legal argument that, well, you're violating the agreement. Where if we put the language in the agreement saying that it's subject to this possibility, well, then we probably could. And I know there's some who are saying that it's a long length of time, you know, even at 20 and especially at 40. So, as I said, I don't have a particular point of view on this one, but I want to hear what other people have to say. Councilman Germana.
Well, Mr. Chairman, my point of view is to have that language help support the idea of going 40 years, because then we're saying up to 40 years. And if it's not working out, we could stop the train. So, yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense. I think we should go forward with that.
Councilman Tron.
I like the language giving you the opportunity to get off the train if we find out that it's going out the wrong direction. Is there any possibility that these funds would be supporting a bond that would be issued? I don't know whether you have the ability to go through anybody for bonding because these are capital projects that if you have the right to close it out, bondholders are usually not thrilled over language like that. So I only raised that issue as to whether or not there would be ever the desire, because certainly with the foreseeability and the dependability of these funds, it would be a project that someplace along the way could support a cash flow for something of that nature. And because these are capital budget dollars, you might lose that ability. I wouldn't buy a bond that you could project out there. So I throw it out just as the countervailing point. So I would like the law directors to do the research. We could always add that the next reading or the reading after that if we felt that we wanted that language in there.
It would actually not be in this legislation. Okay. It would be in the agreement with the mayor. And I would add that I had also already considered that issue, and if we included the repeal language, I think that if there were a case where someone wanted to bond it out, well, then I think as part of the bonding out, they would need to come to the council and ask us to take out the repeal language.
That's fine.
So I
just want to point that out that it's a good point.
One question. The county, the city, and the mayor's association, we appoint 5 or 6 people. How are the other 29 or greater, who actually appoints them, or how are they selected? You did, well, I missed the answer.
That's okay, Council. We have a governance and nominating committee of our board, and they go through a process twice a year. If someone has asked to be on the board, or if there's someone they think would be a good person, they talk about it, they consider it. Then at the end of each person's term, people have 3-year terms, their service is reviewed, and they're asked to either be renominated or thank you for your service and move on. So,
thank you.
Without any other comments, I'm going to ask if there's a motion to substitute the language that the law department submitted to us. The the language that maintains the 20-year length, but includes the other changes that the law department recommended.
Second.
Uh,
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I was trying to see what the difference was between the original and the substitute. I couldn't find it. And I know
Mr.
you
Boatman.
explained it, but I couldn't see it in the legislation.
Okay. Yeah, substitute A, it has the money being distributed to Positively Cleveland, whereas before, the money was distributed in accordance to the county executive, that county executive's desires. It's still, it does look very similar because the money, because of the state statute, has to be spent on capital improvements and the financing of capital improvements, so that doesn't change at all.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, the motion is to substitute, which would make this the version before the committee. All those in favor of substituting, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. It is the version. And the question now is whether there is a motion to move this version to the full council at tomorrow night's council meeting. It is on the agenda pending referral from committee, and this would be for second reading.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? I'm going to ask the clerk to call the roll.
Calling the roll, Ms. Simon?
Yes.
Ms. Conley?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Mr. Germana? Mr. Schron?
Yes.
And Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, the legislation is recommended to the full council for second reading, and I think that that is all that there is on the agenda for today's meeting, so I'm going to ask if there is any miscellaneous business. No miscellaneous business. Has anyone signed in for public comment?
No, Mr.
unrelated?
Chair.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you very much, everybody.